Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I welcome you to our second panel session on the future of the EU enlargement. And I would like to start with some introductory remarks. The second phase of the EU enlargement process with the countries of the Western Balkans started in 2003, were from the beginning combined with great hopes. These hopes were only partially fulfilled thus far. There are various reasons for this. On one hand, obstacles to the implementation of the enlargement policy have emerged time and again, foremost among which have been the following. First, the first two rounds of enlargement in 2004 and 2007, through which the membership of the EU grew from 15 to 27 states, placed a great strain on the enlargement capacity of the Union. At the same time, the process of restructuring the EU, the quest for deeper union, stalled and could not be completed until December 1st, 2009, when the Treaty of Lisbon entered into force. Against this backdrop, the oft-cited enlargement fatigue became increasingly prevalent. Second, the unsatisfactory experience following January 1st, 2007, when Bulgaria and Romania acceded to the EU, even though there were still gaps in their adoption of the body of community law and practice, the acquis communautaire, and the problems inherent in the method of retroactive adoption of elements of the acquis led to growing criticism of the practice of EU enlargement. And third, the time frame for the next stages in the enlargement process has been stretched out, which was devalued the commitment, the commitment to a European perspective for the countries of the Western Balkans. Since 2005, indeed, negotiations were finished with only one country, that was Croatia, that became an EU member state in July last year after 8 years of negotiations. What is the current status with the other 6 Western Balkan states? We have access negotiations with Montenegro since June 2012. With Serbia, such negotiations started in January this year, and they stay dependent from further progress of the normalization process with Kosovo. Macedonia is a candidate state since 2005. That means for almost 10 years. But the start of negotiations was blocked by the name problem with Greece till today. Albania is a very new candidate since June this year. Bosnia didn't make an application thus far and is implementing the so-called Compact for Growth. And Kosovo also didn't make an application and is in the process of the SAA signing, but we will face problems with the EU countries not yet recognizing Kosovo as an independent state. In the countries of the Western Balkans, this timetable of the integration process into the EU, 11 years after Thessaloniki, gives rise to disenchantment with the accession process, which can even manifest itself in veritable crises of confidence. First, the delays referred to above, combined with the perception of an anti-enlargement tone in the public debate in the most of the EU member states, are helping to create a credibility gap regarding the commitment of the EU to the European future of the region. Second, the conduct of the EU in the global financial and economic crisis and in the subsequent euro crisis have shaken faith in the principle of solidarity and in the certainty of irreversible prosperity gains as great incentives for EU membership. In particular, the dealings with Greece have served to reveal how solidarity with a southern European country is really practiced when the chips are down and have resulted in widespread disillusionment. There is no alternative to preservation the European perspective. Against this backdrop of crises, however, 2 questions need to be answered. What can be done to make the enlargement strategy more credible and effective again? And what other approaches in addition to that can be adopted to a new European strategy for Southeastern Europe, which, along with a renewed accession strategy, can help to ensure stable development and the avoidance of conflicts in the Western Balkans? In my view, There is scope at various levels to restore the momentum of the stalled enlargement policy. Only some catchwords to that. Basic conditions. The sooner the EU manages to resolve the financial and economic crisis, the excessive debt of individual member states, and the problems related to the euro, the greater will be its chances of refocusing on the enlargement strategy. Ending the stalemate, we need visible European commitment to resolving the dispute between Greece and Macedonia over the name of the latter state. Relevant intermediate steps, particularly when it appears impossible to speed up the enlargement process significantly, it is time to revert to and renew the strategy of relevant intermediate steps. There are examples from the past, such as the Stability Pact for Southeastern Europe, the Stabilization and Association Process, SAP, with its individual agreements, and the process of visa liberalization. One possibility is revival of the RCC. The idea of deriving mutual benefit from closer regional cooperation was not to be laid to rest with the transition from the Stability Pact to the Regional Cooperation Council, but was to be further developed in the region with greater emphasis on self-reliance. Unfortunately, this outcome has yet to be achieved. The EU, together with the countries of the region, must find a way to inject fresh dynamism into the work of the RCC. Maybe, ladies and gentlemen, we need a second Stability Pact for Southeastern Europe with financial grants for projects of regional importance. This is one idea in consideration between German NGOs and the German government. And last but not least, image of the Western Balkans and image of the EU enlargement policy. Both are in a sorry state and need support measures based on suitable efforts in the realm of public relations. There is particular scope here for organizations from civil society in general and for the future policy of the EU. That's for the introduction, and now we have again a panel with 8 distinguished speakers, most of them ministers, and I would like to start with the speakers from the region, and I would like to give the floor to Dietmir Bushati, Minister of Foreign Affairs from Albania. We congratulate dear Dietmar, for the great step forward with the candidate status you have gained a couple of days before, and so far we start with the happiest member of our panel. You have the floor. Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Thank you also for the nice words. It reminds me school years where I used to be one of the best students in the class, and I hope my country will continue to be one of the best in the region. And having said that, I know that Stefan is well experienced with Albania and also with other best students in our group. Let me first thank Vesna and Croatia for hosting this event here, and also for the topic that is very pertinent to our region, and it's quite existential. And I will start with basically 3 points. The first one, it's related to the current situation in the Balkans in terms of their EU aspiration. If there is one part of the globe where you could clearly see a success story of well-coordinated efforts between US and EU foreign policy, it goes without saying, in my view, that this is Balkans, because for the first time in the history, we have peace, a peace that needs to be sustained. We have enemies that are in the process of transforming into neighbors, but on the other hand, there is no room for complacency, because this is a very challenging process. And if we would look from Thessaloniki 1 to Thessaloniki 2, we would realize that only Croatia managed to be a member of European Union. And unfortunately, there is also a tendency to see new dividing walls in the region and countries of the region falling under different categories. There is a political will from European Union to go ahead with this process, but in some cases I've noticed myself also a lack of political clarity on what comes next. And I've seen also from the communication with EU member states in one capital, for instance, I heard a nice saying that the best enlargement and the best accession is the one we don't even notice in the town. So, which makes me worry about the future. It's not very pleasant to hear from the platform of candidate for President of European Commission that enlargement should be put on hold or should be a pause for the enlargement process. And I could live with that, but I think it would be unacceptable not to have the proper instruments and the political and financial instruments being activated for Western Balkans with basically a new strategy and also a new approach. The second point is the categorization of the Western Balkan countries and why I believe there is no room for complacency. Although you mentioned in your introductory remarks that there are countries that are in the accession tables, there are countries that got the candidate status and countries that are still potential candidate. Most of Western Balkan countries are sharing the same dilemmas and challenges. In terms of ethnic divisions, we still have a region where societies are in some parts quite divided. We still are facing problems in the way how we sit around the table. We still face problems in terms of statehood and recognition, which puts at difficulty also the free movement of people within our region and the way how we act and cooperate with each other. And we are still more or less at the same level at front of the economic crisis and lack of perspective. And lack of perspective, I think, is the real enemy of Western Balkans nowadays. And the third point, which I wanted to make here, it's whether there is a way forward. There is always a way forward. First of all, we need to make this process more political, and I wish and hope that any important decision for Western Balkans or specific countries is seen also through the lens of geopolitics, given also the current circumstances in the Eastern Partnership countries. Second, we need to change gradually the narrative from peace, that used to be the main narrative. Now the main narrative for Western Balkans should be economic development and prosperity. Thirdly, we need to act as a region. We are not yet a region. If we see the level of interaction, we are not yet a region. Karl can share, I think, with audience also what happened with him yesterday in order to reach Dubrovnik, because I was reading the tweets, which shows that we're not yet a region. So we need to ensure connectivity of the region and connectivity of the region with the main corridors and axis of European Union. And if there will be the Balkans would be seen not only from the perspective of regatta principle, which is a healthy one and should be ensured, but there should be also a combination between regatta principle and regional cooperation, because we are not Visegrad countries, we are not Baltic countries. And what I mean by that, maybe it's time that the next European Commission looks progress report in a more cross-comparative ways, also in the acquis-related areas, in order to instill more healthy competition in the region, such as the one we have seen during the visa liberalization process, where the reform process paid off, and also we have seen an interconnection and interrelation between European Commission, aspirant countries, and EU member states. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I would like to ask you two questions regarding your presentation. The first one is about your idiom of lack of perspectives. What is the role of the EU enlargement process for encouraging people to accept transformation work, reforms, and so on? What is the momentum, the positive momentum of the EU enlargement policy, especially after that very important step of the candidate status you have gained a couple of days before? And the second question is, you have said we are not a region. I think that is a very important statement. But the question is, what do we need to become a region here in that environment? Do we need new platforms, new political platforms, or in which direction you see an outcome from this position not being a region?
I'll start from the second one. I don't think that we need the new political platforms, but we need to reinforce the current ones, and we need to bring back the political soul in the enlargement process, which is not yet there. I might give you a pessimistic picture, but I don't think that it will work only with opening interim and closing benchmarks. I'm not advocating that there should not be benchmarks. They have to be, and in the case of Western Balkans, let's have a stricter approach, because we lack a solid democratic tradition like we have seen also in other rounds of enlargements. But on the other hand, when I said that we are not a region, we don't inherit the same legacy as Balts or the same legacy as Visegrad countries. And if we speak about strategic projects like Trans-Adriatic Pipeline or Ionian-Adriatic Pipeline, we need to anticipate these projects also with infrastructure projects where more than 3 or 4 or 5 countries of the region are working together. So there should be a win-win basically scenario where local ownership is vested as well, and where EU and other international institutions, financial institutions, could invest into this process. So it should be a project-based also in the case of Western Balkans. Regarding the first question, yes, it's true. There is a positive momentum in my country. Due to the decision of the European Union to grant Albania candidate status. And I wish we could build on this momentum, and I wish the distance between the decision for granting Albania candidate status and the decision for opening accession talks won't be that long, and won't be the same case that we have seen in the previous rounds. And again, in the Balkans, I'm not going to mention cases. You have success stories, and you have also laggards, or basically countries that are in a way or another blocked into this process. And we have seen more inclusion, more reforms, more leverage for EU and other actors at the same time.
Thank you, Dietmar. I will change now to another speaker of the region, to Nikola Popovsky, Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Republic of Macedonia. You have the privilege to be for a very long time in the candidate status for almost 10 years. Is that a privilege or a problem for you?
Well, it's definitely an advantage to address a panel that is talking about the future of the European Union when you have already been into the future and you've seen the future. By seeing that, I mean that we are still the only country that was part of the Vilnius group. No one remembers probably in this panel that there was such a group, because they're all in NATO already. Macedonia is still not part of NATO. And we've seen that almost 15 years ago, we had messages and people coming to Skopje and saying, well, listen, guys, in a couple of years you're in NATO, and another couple of years you will be in the European Union, and things will be settled. That's why I say that it is a sort of an advantage, because we've seen already facing these challenges long time ago. Most of the countries that were facing, practically all the countries that were facing these sort of challenges at that time are already part of both groups, NATO and EU. Now, it has, I would say, some positive and negative sides, and there I would talk in terms of hopes and worries. I will agree with Dietmar that probably the worries are the ones that are more visible. One, maybe because of mentality. I think that we have developed a rationale in the Balkans of always complaining, victimization, and reflexes which are pretty common for this part of the world, which are probably in contradiction with the Anglo-Saxon kind of spirit, which is always forward-looking, innovative, and looking for other horizons, probably many other places in Europe. And I would say the worries are coming from a few points. One, well, we hear messages that probably at least for the next 5 years there will be no enlargement, and that the appetite might not be that high in the period afterwards. There are also political costs that are associated with promoting that idea, especially in the member states. I mean, you don't necessarily become the most popular person in the country by saying that, yes, I'm going to support the enlargement and it's going to happen tomorrow, because the public opinion and the feeling mostly is going along the lines of, we have suffered somehow during the previous enlargements, and do we want to repeat the same experience in just a short period of time? And there is also, in that kind of context, a sort of bilateralization of the enlargement process. And that means that a member state which is in the process kind of has a client among the countries that are on the road to join the Union, and because of the political realities in the rest of the member states, it can easily become the driver in the seat of the destiny of the country that is on the road, which is not exclusive, I would say. But these are the facts. On the other side, we have hopes, and I think that these hopes are extremely important, and politicians both in member states and in candidate and potential candidate countries have the responsibility to work on them. One hope that this thing, no matter how many critics it has, it works for more than 60 years. And it works pretty well. The proof that it works pretty well is that people around the world are trying to mimic that. Whether it concerns ASEAN, Mercosur, NAFTA, other efforts, they try to come here, learn from the European experience, and copy-paste it or adopt it in their environments. And finally, no one has come up with a better option. That should be emphasized. This is the best option that we have. The final point that I would say, and it really is the key to the future, is economy. Economy is what matters. I think that we will understand each other much better, and Prime Minister Milanovic had a very good point yesterday. If you don't tackle the divergences in wealth, simplifying the things, between countries, region, places, you cannot be successful as political model, and vice versa. And that means for the countries that are in the process, the future would mean in the period during which the European Union has politically decided that there will be a break, we have to make sure that this gap is narrowing. Depends on us, how much reforms we do, how much investments we attract. Depends also on the others that are in the Union, and that is providing us some valid basis and some credible perspective, then we can sell to those that are helping the economic development, investors and business people. That's the key.
Thank you very much. That was a very constructive view on the EU and the future of the EU and the importance of the EU as an example also for other regions, but you didn't address domestic problems. I have made the remark about the name problem. Of course, we are interested in your assessment. What are the chances to resolve this problem in the future? does the momentum of the EU enlargement for your country give also a chance for a compromise with your neighbor country?
Mm-hmm. Very clearly, we have a strategic interest to settle the dispute with Greece. For a number of reasons, not to expand too much, even the purely economic one would give you the logic. Greece is one of the major investors, it's one of our major trading partners, we have very good relations outside of the political dispute, and I think we have a strategic interest to get rid of it. We see that as our strategic interest. On the other side, in order to match that, and knowing this, because this is not secret, you need to have at least, if you talk in Pareto optimum terms, if we want 80% to get to the solution, you need to have the remaining 20% in order for the story to be a whole one. But there are a few things that are a handicap to that. Political motivation in Greece is nowhere close to the political motivation that we have in Macedonia. Might sound biased, but it's proved in practice. The context in which we are put is that, number one, no one would like to go to Athens and say, well, listen, guys, that's enough. Maybe you should do some moves, because no one wants to have an additional trouble to Greece. The political agenda in Greece is focused in a completely other sphere. And I think that without creating that proper kind of arrangement, the bilateralization of the enlargement process will always be there. How it is handled, it can be handled in one way on presenting domestic challenges which are in another field than the name issue. It can be presented by diverting attention by saying, yes, but you know, still challenges, Balkans, and you need still reforms, etc., and there is a fatigue. And unless there is a move in that kind of motivational mood, things are pretty difficult to change on their own. Mm-hmm. And any of the countries that has been in a position to be a candidate country, actually outside of the 6 founding ones, everybody else has that experience. When you're in the demanding side, the perception from those that are offering you the European perspective is that we hold you in our hands. Mm-hmm. We don't have much of a pressure.
One additional question to that. Do you feel that your country is in a way a victim of the consensus principle inside the European Union? We have had this problem also with other countries. I remind you, for example, this tension between Slovenia and Croatia that also stalled for a while the European integration of Croatia, and that was the same. You need a consensus with all the member states. Is that a problem, or should we change this, maybe?
It's very difficult to say that from outside, because you might create quite unhappy people from the other side, whatever you say. I will tell you my personal and honest assessment is that solidarity is definitely one of the principles that allowed us to have this European project a success one. On the other side, in order for solidarity to really work, you need to stick to certain principles that you follow even in difficult times. Frankly, if I'm another member state than Greece, last thing I would like to do would be to have a conflict with Greece. And frankly, why would I look for a conflict with Greece? Knowing that they are not keen to deal with this issue. But if this solidarity is extended, then you kill the perspectives and the hopes of those that are on the demanding side. And you say, well, where is this going to? So I would keep the solidarity, but I would associate solidarity with certain principles. And I think that we are risking to lose a little bit outside of the picture because of the current challenges and because of the context that I have described of not being extremely popular while you propagate the enlargement agenda. We should not discourage you, and it should not discourage definitely all the member states that are in the club, because they're holding the key.
Thank you for that very interesting point you have made in your answer. So we will now go ahead to another neighboring country, that is Bulgaria. Christian Vigenin is Minister of Foreign Affairs, and you are a representative of a country that is for 7 years member of the European Union. So the question is also about the positive momentum of the EU in a country that is a member state of the European Union, facing all these problems you have in the domestic policy, but also in the neighborhood. You have the floor.
Thank you. Thank you, Gernot, for your question. But before that, I would like to congratulate especially Vesna and our hosts here for this very interesting event that we have yesterday and today and tomorrow. I think despite the fact that we have discussed these issues several times already, I think today's discussion is extremely interesting because we've heard a lot of interesting and new ideas. So thank you for organizing this event. I would, on the basis of your question, Gernot, I would start with something that Federica mentioned in her intervention. It is not just enlargement. We should not see this process enlargement, but rather as integration, EU integration. And the process of integration cannot stop with the membership within the EU. This is a process that continues. And I'm sure that all, especially the new member states, of course, face certain difficulties. I remember the discussions in 2006, 5, 6, are Bulgaria and Romania ready? Should we postpone a bit their membership and so on? But first of all, I'm thankful that we have not lost the momentum for the membership of the two countries. And secondly, there are some problems, some issues that cannot be solved fully in advance, or for sure can be solved much better once the country is inside. And I can tell you that our experience, despite the difficulties that we face here and there in one or another area, it's much easier to resolve those issues when you're inside. And I think this is one of the lessons that we can learn. I don't say that we have to lower the, let's say, the requirements, the benchmarks, but just to keep in mind that some issues can be better solved if the country is already in, and not to postpone forever the entrance within the Union. I would like to say a few words since I fully agree that the enlargement or the EU integration process is not simply a technical process. It has a strong political meaning as well. And I believe that talking about the Western Balkans and the membership of the countries in the Western Balkans, we should take into account the global picture that we face right now. We see increasing instability, to say it in a soft way, in the southern Mediterranean, Middle East, on the eastern borders of the European Union. I would say global contradictions between EU and Russia, NATO, Russia. I don't think that this will continue forever, but I think if we look at the map of Europe, obviously Western Balkans are a region, or the countries there, are countries which will need a stronger commitment on our side. It's important for those countries, but it's important also for the European Union. Again, I don't say we should lower the requirements or the expectations, but we should strengthen our focus on those countries, just because of the global picture that we face now. I think you understand what I mean. It is very positive, and here we should congratulate Commissioner Füle, that we have learned our lessons from the previous, now talking a bit on the technical side, that we have learned our lessons from the previous instrument for pre-accession assistance, and now I believe we have a much better instrument, which is much more flexible. We can provide better targeted support for those countries. And the amounts are quite high, so there should be a full use of those money in order to support the reforms in the countries. But whatever we do, and I here fully share what Dietmar said about the regional cooperation, because sometimes we forget that actually it's not just adding countries one by one into the EU. it is extremely important for our region to have this sense of regional responsibility of all countries, both candidates and member states, and to strengthen our regional cooperation on the basis, of course, of the EU values, with the aim to bring the whole region and to integrate fully the whole region into the EU. And here, I would say that a lot has to be done, because if you see our infrastructure, we need better connectivity between our countries. It's about roads, it's about railways, energy infrastructure, gas pipeline connections. The more connected we are, the better it would be also for our economic growth and social progress. And I think all of us have this understanding, but we need more efforts of our governments to achieve this. And of course, the support of the EU should be now directed in creating this interconnectivity. This way we can make our region attractive for investments, and this would solve one of the concerns, especially of the richer Western European countries. The more economic opportunities and social perspectives we have in our region, the less would be the pressure and the less arguments there will be in some countries why Western Balkan countries should not be part of the EU. And if you allow me, I would say that the famous words of Churchill that the Balkans produce more history than they consume. I think it's really time to stop producing history and start creating future, and that's extremely important for the young generations. We will play our role as a member state. We need to, in addition to the support given by the European Commission and the EU institutions, we need more mutual support, technical expert support to share our experience. That's what we are trying to do. And I'm rather optimistic. Maybe there will be no enlargement or there will be no new countries entering the EU in the next 5 years, but we can assure the candidate countries that the efforts are important, that support will continue, will be even strengthened. And just for information, if I'm not wrong, Montenegro is planning to complete negotiations in the second half of 2018. I don't see Igor. I hope he would confirm that. And that is the semester where Bulgaria will preside the Council. So I really hope that this could be one of our goals, to mention one concrete country, that during our presidency, Montenegro will complete its negotiation talks, and then the process will continue for Montenegro joining the EU soon after. Thank you.
Blagodajem mnogo, Christian. Thank you very much for your look in the future of the European Union and the European enlargement. And insofar, it's maybe not very diplomatic if I ask you now a question about the past. Was it a mistake by the EU to give Bulgaria and Romania the membership status in January 2007? After your experience you have made with some tensions with the European Commission, with some problems with the implementing of the preconditions of the acquis communautaire in the last few years, would you accept such a statement?
No, I don't think that EU has made any mistake, because I mentioned that, well, there were certain shortages, but the Commission found a way to deal with these shortages, the so-called cooperation verification mechanism. Well, it's not the best option, because it looks like something kind of a never-ending story with this mechanism. I hope that the new Commission will discuss carefully with the two countries what is the way out of from this mechanism. But I would say that our experience with this mechanism actually created this new approach towards the enlargement, opening the two chapters 23 and 24 early in the process, so that these obviously difficult issues, not just for Bulgaria and Romania, but for the whole region, are taken into account, tackled in time, so that the countries can produce the so-called track record. And I'm happy that Croatia entered the EU, maybe a bit later than it was expected at the beginning, but without such a mechanism. Otherwise, I would say that there is no country which has no disputes here and there with the Commission. And that's normal, because countries try to focus on some national issues, and the Commission is trying to secure the interests of the Union and the legislation. But there were no really major issues that would lead to a conflict whatsoever. So we have a very positive and constructive cooperation with the Commission on a number of issues. And I would say for example, with regard to adoption and implementation of legislation, Bulgaria is definitely not the worst case. So we are somewhere in the middle of the table. I just signed the last report for the first 6 months of this year. So I would say integration of Bulgaria, the process of integration of Bulgaria continues. And I'm again thankful that no postponement has been made, because, and maybe later in the discussion we could discuss also this, when a momentum is lost, then the difficulties become even more difficulties become deeper, difficult to solve, and this is something that we should take into account also in the process of enlargement of the EU with the Western Balkans. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Christian. We stay in the region, and I ask now the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Romania, Titus Coletan, to address the audience.
Thank you very much. I want to thank Gernot Erler for the introductory remarks, and also Vesna and our Croatian colleagues for the warm hospitality. Thank you very much. The future of the EU enlargement. It's a theme that we have discussed it last time in the frame of the Foreign Affairs Council some months ago during a lunch. It was not in an official session, it was during a working lunch that probably reflected the level of interest or commitment of the European Union before the European elections. And now more serious. We had a very serious discussion, and many substantial positions expressed by the colleagues, by the ministers. Some of the ministers and the commissioners are present today, and this reflected different level of sensitivity to the subject, and it's natural, it's objective. For us in the region, the EU member states, it's definitely one of the top priorities. For some other colleagues, maybe the level of sensitivity is less prominent, but it's natural. But I want to mention the fact that during the discussion, one of the positions expressed by one of my best colleagues and friends was made the reference to the need to not offer to those countries from the neighborhood which are associated politically and economically speaking, or became associated lately, wrong expectations, and not to generate later frustrations because we are not be able to do it. And this generated from my side a reaction. And I will try to express the essence of this reaction and the philosophy that we are sharing in Bucharest. Because the discussion was in terms of what brought us the EU enlargement, us, the new members, and to the old Europe, if you accept. Generally, I'm not accepting this denomination, but let's use it today. We agreed, I think, that the EU enlargement and the integration process is one of the most successful tools that the European Union had. We accepted the fact that it's extremely important to preserve the power of transformation that EU is generating in our neighborhood. The fact that we continue to stay a pole of interest and attractivity for the countries in our region, the neighborhood, which today are candidates or aspirant countries. For us, I think it's extremely important also from a political point of view, of course, from an economic point of view, but also for security reasons. So all in all, it was all the time a win-win package. You mentioned the fact that we have to answer, and you raised this question in the preliminary, in the introductory ranks, how to do more credible the enlargement strategy. And I want to give maybe one of the answers. Let's not forget, and it's fair to discuss politically, also among the European politicians, that it was beneficially from a democratic point of view, from a political point of view, from an economic point of view. The enlargement of the market gave a lot of benefits to the Western countries and the Western companies. Don't forget this. It's beneficially also for us, definitely. It gave more strength, and it gave us a better role in the international arena. We have discussed it last year in Bucharest, and I think the chairperson of the Foreign Affairs Committee of China, of the Parliament, mentioned the 16 plus China meeting in Bucharest. It was not only about different projects, economic projects, or different individual interests. It was something that is complementary to the European project and is giving more relevance to the EU in the international arena and relations. If we want to be more and more relevant, we have to maintain and to use this tool of enlargement and integration. Speak about the economic benefits, and I'm going back to what you have mentioned, the principle of consensus. Is it an obstacle sometimes? Please don't raise it, because I will come back to the Schengen accession of Romania and Bulgaria, speaking about consensus. And here it's a very paradox situation. And I will make a reference to the case of Romania, because you made reference to the case of Romania, not because I want to sell my products, but to explain something, and I want to pass a message. In Romania, we are in the third in a row year of economic growth. Last year, after years of, let's say, huge efforts with costs, we succeeded to make a step, a qualitative step, in terms of competitiveness. In terms of economic growth, 3.5 of the GDP last year. This year, in the first 6 months, it's already 3.9. Last year, we had the maximum historical of the exports in Romania, less than 1% the inflation, respect for the criteria on the deficit and so on. This year, I will take 1 more minute if possible. This year, it will be better. That means it generated more competitiveness to us, but it's very beneficial for the companies from the Western Europe. And I can tell you that the most beneficiary are the countries and the companies from those countries which are still obstacle for the Romania's accession to Schengen. And at the same time, this is a paradox, they're losing money and time, like us. And there is a discrepancy between the economic realities and the fulfillment of the standards, including the legal standards that you are making reference, and the political attitude sometimes and the political discourse of the leaders. Because if we want to make more credible the enlargement process integration, we need a much more fair political discussion, first of all, inside EU. There is a major difference between this type of discourse of UKIP, Le Front National, and what was the history of building this European Union, the founding fathers, the other big European leaders, that they had a political vision. They built with courage this EU. The historical reconciliation, French-German reconciliation, building the economic project of EU, that implied political vision and courage. And we need to come back to this type of political attitude inside the EU. And to have a final brief comment, speaking about our region and also the eastern neighborhood. What we did until recently under the Romanian chairmanship in office of the Southeast European Cooperation Process, CECP, we tried to do two things, and we made also some tests. And I think we succeeded. First, to support the regional cooperation, because in the end, it's extremely important to stimulate the reconciliation of better cooperation, politically speaking, the economic projects that were mentioned, the infrastructure, and so on. And I think it was a fair commitment and a fair result. We succeeded based on an inclusive approach with the support of the Commission of the European friends to stay all of us at the same table. Kosovo was present. We succeeded to secure the presence of Kosovo from now on in our CECP structure. And in the same time, to synchronize with the European path and the European enlargement and the aspirant candidate countries' interests. We worked hard on the judiciary, combating corruption, organized crime, with concrete things, not theory. Concrete things. And we passed the message, we transferred to the EU structure of political decision. And I made a test. I proposed to our colleagues already in February to give the mandate to the chairmanship in office, Romanian chairmanship in office, to support on behalf of all of us, EU and non-EU member states, at the critical moment when we have discussed it on Albania's status of candidate, to express support on behalf of all the region. It didn't happen before. And it happened this time, and we succeeded. It was an added value, and we succeeded to reach a good decision. By the way, we support it based on the consultation, also in our region, that Albania will follow at the chairmanship in office at CECP. This type of regional cooperation, it's extremely important because it's helping also the EU enlargement process. So I will stop at this time, but I will finish by saying that Southeast Europe, for us, it's also including the Republic of Moldova. We are working on in our case, on a pre-accession logic with the Republic of Moldova, because, for instance, 75% of the DCFTA in the case of Moldova, it's acquis communautaire. It's European legislation, procedure, that represents that the Moldovan society is working and will continue to work based on the European rules. This is a concrete tool of European integration. Yes, thank you.
Thank you very much, Titus, for your very clear statement. Unfortunately, I have to suppress my questions to you, looking at the watch. And but I think your statement about you have underlined the role of the benefits for both sides, for the applicant countries and for the member countries. I think that's a very important point. But we have to go ahead in the neighborhood, and I would like now to ask Tibor Navracic, the Minister for Foreign Affairs and Trade from Hungary, from a country that has celebrated this year's 10 years membership in the European Union. So they have made a lot of experience with your membership and have maybe a different approach to the future of the EU.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Well, first, let me stress one possible political triviality, but I think it must be stressed again and again that for us, for the Central European nations, the enlargement of the EU or the European integration as a broad process is not just about economy, not just about a political union. It is about the stability and the geopolitical stability and strategic stability of the continent as well. I think it must be stressed because I fully understand the position of the so-called old member state countries. It's pretty ridiculous that after 10 years we are still new member states in the EU, but that's usually we are called new member states, so we have new experiences, certainly. But the old member states regards the EU enlargement as a risky project from the point of view of economy or politics or domestic political issues. But on the other hand, I think for the Central European countries, and we can remember the the effects of and the consequences of the EU enlargement, the Eastern enlargement. No doubt that it has huge implications for the stability of the continent, and our Croatian friends and even Slovenian friends can talk a lot about it. I think we are in a typical political dilemma situation, which means that we have to bridge over a gap. On the one hand, we have an enlargement fatigue in the EU member states, and some of the nations inside the EU are questioning the sense and the meaning of the future EU enlargement or EU integration, while for us it's an everyday practice, even for the politicians. It is an everyday practice to stand up for the EU enlargement and to endorse the meaning of the future EU enlargement, just because it's about our neighbors and just because it is about our friends. So, on the other hand, on the other side of the gap, there is a mixed feeling of the applicant countries, a part of enthusiasm toward the path toward the EU as not only a geographical category, but as a normative category as well, the homeland of the rule of law, the homeland of representative democracy, the homeland of the market economy, and so on and so forth. And a part of disillusionment, just as Nicola said, that there is a useless waiting for the membership, and it's a moving target. We felt the same in the early 90s and during the 90s, that however we felt we were prepared, but we had to wait for further and further deadlines for the membership. So we have to bridge over that gap of expectations or gap of positions. And I think while both sides has their own individual tasks, we have a common task as well in the future. So I broke my brief introduction into 3 points. The first is, one is the task of the EU members. Well, I think the European Union's most important task is to overcome economic difficulties, because the EU is not over of the economic crisis, unfortunately. So we have to reinforce our budgetary discipline, we have to revive our market economies, and we have to revive our internal market to be prepared for involving the new member states in economic terms and in social terms as well. The applicant countries' duty is to be prepared, and Titus just said that, for instance, Moldova is pretty in compliance with the acquis communautaire. I think it's valid for most of the applicant countries. So they really show up good records in this process, but we have to endorse them during that process. And the third one, which could be pretty delicate at the moment because of the Ukrainian crisis, but we have to think not only about the Balkan enlargement or Balkan EU integration, but the Eastern enlargement, the Eastern neighborhood as well. We have to take into account Russia as well in the longer term. If we want to have a successful enlargement, an enlargement which is not a weapon against other nations or other regions, we have to think about reviving some good cooperation in longer term with other participants which will not be part of the enlargement, because I think we have to develop or redevelop a new partnership with Russia in longer term, which clearly not be a part of the European Union. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Tibor, for your statement. I would like to ask you one question in context with the earlier discussions we have had in this panel. There we have heard demands for more regional cooperation and maybe for some bodies for that in the Western Balkans. You have made your experience with the Visegrad group. How important is regional cooperation also in the way to the integration in the European Union? How important was it for your country, for Hungary?
Well, the V4 cooperation, I think, is a success story. And it has a symbolic importance because it could be a best practice for the southeastern European countries for the cooperation. And I think we have to give our experiences in the development of the V4 cooperation, because the V4 cooperation had their own crises as well, not only successes, but crises as well. And we have to give our experiences to the southeastern countries, and even we have to be open for further cooperation with the southeastern European countries. There is I would say that there is a good competition among, for instance, Romania, Austria, Croatia, Slovenia, Hungary, probably Bulgaria, I'm not informed of it, to be a part of the history of that peninsula or of that region, and we can help a lot, I think, in that cooperation, the development of that cooperation.
Thank you very much, Tibor. Moldova was twice mentioned in our current discussions, and I turn over now to Julian Groza, Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Republic of Moldova. I remember, Julian, that your country in the very beginning of the enlargement process tried to become a member of the Western Balkan countries that started in the work of the Stability Pact for Southeastern Europe. Now you are part of another game. How is the view from your country to the future of the EU enlargement process?
Thank you very much. For this question, I will refer definitely to this, and I will try to show you why Moldova matters now, probably more than ever. But first of all, let me thank the organizers for giving me this unique opportunity to be part of this distinguished panel audience and to try to share with you some of Moldova's reflections and endeavors related to European integration. Allow me in the next 5 minutes or so to argue why Moldova indeed matters and why Moldova should be part of the future reflections of EU enlargement. In this context, I will try to put the discussion, the introduction into perspective, answering to a few questions related why, first of all, of course, where we are, why it matters, how, when, and what exactly we will do. So first of all, about where we are, the context. Moldova is a European country. In 2009, we had been part of the Eastern Partnership process of creation as a framework of the ENP. Now, after 5 years, we have accomplished the main objective, or we are on the way of accomplishing the main objective of this partnership, which is the political association and economic integration with the European Union. We have lately the benefit of traveling free in the European Union. And at the same time, answering to you, Garrett, indeed Moldova strived to be part of the Western Balkans pre-accession, basically, framework, and we have succeeded because Moldova now is a member of the Southeastern European Cooperation Process. We are founding member of the RCC and founding member of CEFTA. And in fact, this is what makes Moldova different and what makes us also more attractive to EU enlargement debate. Now, let me tell you as well about the challenges we face currently. We face a number of challenges, of course, internal and external challenges, very difficult regional environment triggered by these developments in the eastern part of our border. related to one of the important neighbors, which is not very immediate neighbor of Moldova. By this, I would like also to introduce another question: why? Why we need to talk more about Moldova in the context of the future enlargement? Indeed, there will be, and there are many people who would find different explanations why we don't need to talk about enlargement now. Different reasons, but there are as many arguments why we should do that. Because uncertainty leads to insecurity. And what we need more, it's confidence and determination in delivering our objectives. So Moldova is a European country. We just signed the association agreement with the European Union. Our parliament have ratified it. Already there are some member states which already have ratified this agreement. It's really important. And indeed, this agreement is also very unique in the sense that it is more comprehensive and more concrete in terms of a key which has to be transposed in Moldova than similar agreements which were signed by countries in the Western Balkans or even current member states which have been in the process of pre-accession before. The big difference is this CFTA, which indeed, as Mr. Minister Kolatsan has mentioned, more than 75% of the acquis has to be transposed in the Moldovan legislation as a result of implementation of this CFTA, part of the association agreement. So the fact that Moldova is part of the Eastern Partnership policy, we understand that Eastern Partnership is not about membership, but the Article 49 of the Treaty of the European Union was not cancelled, it's there. So every European country which succeeds to comply with conditions will be eligible to be a member of the European Union. And the fact that Moldova is part of the Southeastern European cooperation process, RCC, CEFTA, actually that helped Moldova to be, in a way, in advance, or at least of understanding what we need to do and how difficult that is. And regional cooperation we have here in the Southeastern Europe and in the Eastern Partnership, I think it helps us to be more prepared and to make Moldova more digestible to the European Union when the debates about enlargement will take place. And now, before concluding, let me outline what, when, and how we should do in order to bring this debate, bring Moldova in the debate of future enlargement. So as I said, we have just signed the association agreement which has this objective: political association, economic integration. Our main priority now is to ensure qualitative implementation of the association agreement. It will mean, of course, continuing reforms in the justice sector, fight corruption, make Moldova more attractive to investment, build institutions which will make Moldova more predictable, more attractive to its citizens and also to the regions in Moldova. By doing this, we hope we will create this critical mass of understanding as well, and which will prepare Moldova to the moment when the EU will be ready to talk about membership. And now, for us, it's really important to build on this overall support that Moldova so far gets from the European Union member states. And the European Parliament, before going in elections, have issued a resolution which is confirming the European aspirations for Moldova. And we hope that now we will try to identify this creative link between the association agreement, which clearly mentions that Moldova is a European country and the European Union is supporting this European choice of Moldova, and the Treaty of the European Union, which says that every European country has to be part of the can be part of the European Union. And already that is there, because we have heard debates about the fact that the association agreement is not the final goal. So we are going there. We hope that in the next year or so, we will try to get all the support from the European member states for this European perspective of Moldova. Because European integration for us is not only a geopolitical choice, it's more than that. It's a best transformative instrument that have been proved already workable in the European Union. On this continent, there is no other alternative. So we hope that we will get more arguments for application, for membership application. Who knows, maybe next year, maybe later, when we will have a moral support to do that. And to conclude, we are in an environment which triggers more attention from the European Union to the region. we, Moldova, have a vision how to transform the country and how to continue the European integration process. Now we need more confidence, we need more determination for this process to happen, so that Moldova gets clear message from our European Union friends that we belong to Europe. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Julian, for your contribution. I will only make a very short remark. We all are very impressed about your very fast ratification process you have managed after the signature for the association agreement. But I really hope that in parallel to your long-term perspectives regarding membership in the European Union, will give the message to your public how important is that step you have made with the association agreement, and that you enjoy the chances of this agreement, and yet to speak about the challenges coming from this association agreement. I think that is very important. Not forget this very important step forward, speaking about the long-term perspectives of your country. That is only a very modest a modest point I wanted to make. Now we have another speaking of a country that is very intensively linked with the Southeast European region, not only with the Western Balkans. That's Austria. Michael Linheit, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Yes, we have always been very much involved in this enlargement process, because Austria, being a country with borders with all these countries, we just remember maybe historically Eastern Bloc. We had most of our neighbors were member of this Eastern Bloc, and we had also the borders with Yugoslavia. So I think for us it was really a vital thing to go into this enlargement, and many reasons, and much has already been said today, has been put on the table. Yes, of course, EU enlargement is one of the greatest achievements of the EU. Yes, it brought peace and stability and security to Europe, to the continent. Yes, it's an instrument of peace. But if we ask ourselves now, 100 years after the outbreak of the World War I, whether this project is finished, we have to say no, it is not completed yet. And well, much has been said also about fatigue today, and maybe in some of the candidate countries now we have also the EU has maybe become less attractive. I think the financial crisis that we had was certainly not an advertisement for enlargement. And some of the countries have also the impression, that was already said today, that there are further hurdles in the process, that it has become more complicated. I mean, if we just think about Croatia, it took them 7 years, more than 7 years, until they finally became a member. It is not easy for all these politicians to make these reforms, and at the same time they have to win elections. So what can we do to revitalize this process? And I think we have also good models. Croatia, of course, we are very, very happy that they are a member of the European Union. I would say it was also vital for us. Albania, I think, is another model and we are very happy that they have got the candidate status. And on the other hand, it's also a signal how some countries, some member countries, could very effectively work together to push forward an important issue within the EU. So I think we need to look also forward. What can we do in the future? We have to look for perspectives for next enlargement. I would like to mention maybe only 4 short points. First, I think we have to make efforts in communicating and to revitalize positive attitudes. We have to explain our people, but also in the candidate countries, what are the positive aspects, but also what would be the political and economical costs of non-enlargement. We have them to inform our people about the situation in those new countries. I think it is extremely important to have the dialogue with the civil society, to go into youth programs, into cultural links, and just the aim should be, I think, to overcome stereotypes, ignorance about those new partners and prejudices. Second, conditionality has already been mentioned as well. I think we would probably all agree that EU conditionality is a powerful tool to promote changes, but we think it has to be applied in a fair and coherent manner. And second, it has also been mentioned already, maybe from in the previous panel, from another angle, we ourselves as member countries, we have also to fulfill our own goals, otherwise we're just going to lose credibility. Third, we think that bilateral disputes should not have any room in such a process. We think we should keep them out, and single countries should not have a veto in this accession process. And I think in all these regional contacts, in the regional conflicts, I think it will be also important to solve these regional conflicts. Again, I think Serbia and Albania are a very positive example. With very courageous decisions, they were able to promote their issues. And internally, it's in the respective countries, and I'm thinking especially of Bosnia and Herzegovina, I think it is also important that politicians are taking decisions, brave decisions, and that they manage to reach a certain degree of national consensus on very fundamental issues. Otherwise, I think they are going really to even destabilize, to put it mild, their own country. So I think it's time to find also there pragmatically compromises. And fourth, regional cooperation. You have mentioned it yourself. Regional cooperation is, I think, extremely important. Interregional, but also neighboring cooperation. There are certain tools which are already available, like the Regional Cooperation Council, but I think it's also important to actively participate in the Danube and the forthcoming Ionian and Adriatic macro-regional strategies. Well, just to conclude, I would say I would appeal to the candidate and future candidate countries to continue their reform process. I think the best way to convince the EU member countries that enlargement is necessary is to be well prepared, to approach well prepared the EU member states for future enlargement.
Thank you very much, Michael, for your presentation. It would be very worth to discuss your 4 points, and I'm very grateful that you have mentioned this very difficult situation with Bosnia-Herzegovina. That's also an important point, but unfortunately our time is phasing out, and so we come to the conclusion of our panel with 2 extremely experienced politicians from outside the Western Balkan regions, with Jean Asselborn and with Carl Bildt. So I give the floor to Jean, please.
Thank you, Gernot. So I want also to thank Vesna for that I can be here in Dubrovnik. I don't know what the accession process means. I think that I am the only foreign minister here who represents a country that is a founding member. You are excluded, but not because you are higher than we are here. You are our boss here. But I can imagine what it means to be a member who waits for accession to the European Union. I just want to, I became minister 10 years ago, and I saw a lot of evolutions, positive evolutions here on the Balkans. And let me tell you that your Chancellor, Gerhard Schröder, when I was in the first European Council, he spoke every time about the peace project, European Union. Peace project not only related to the past, but also to the future. And the most important mean we have in the European Union is European integration. That's the raison d'etre, I think, of the European Union. So enlargement, okay, I agree with you, Federica, that enlargement may not be the good word to express it, but it is the word that we use in the European Union. I am here in Croatia, and the accession of Croatia was really very, very difficult, Vesna. I remember that at a certain period, and Carl, I think he knows it, I was the head of a task force, and we had to argue with Carla Del Ponte, who was in ICTY, and we had also to deal with a person called Gotovina. It was a story, it was emotions, pressure for democracy, but it was also a happy end. In 2013, we had been in Zagreb, and we have done it, and if I say we have done it, it's Croatia, and it is the European Union. I remember also in 2004, when I became minister, the very, very difficult situation in Serbia, in Belgrade. Kostunica, I think that you remember this name, was there, and it was not easy. And if I see today the progress done, and I think we have to thank really Stefan and also Cassie and the important actors on both sides. I don't want to mention them, but a very, very important way has been done, and I think that we can go straight to a solution on this difficult issue, Pristina and Belgrade. The most easiest seems to be and will be Montenegro. Montenegro has the size of Luxembourg, and everything is possible if you have our size. So the most, one of the more difficult, emotional difficult, but it's for a non-Greek and a non-Macedonian really not easy to understand what is happening about this hurdle. I think efforts have to be made on both sides. If I mention that EU is a peace project, that doesn't mean that EU is able to make peace at any conditions. That's not possible. So really, there are encouragements from the whole European Union to find this name and to try to deblock the situation and to come forward. On Albania, that was also interesting to see the evolution in the last 10 years. Okay, it was a fight. If you take two persons, Berisha and Edi Rama and Berisha, but I think now the government today gives a lot of hope to Albania. Albania is what is concerning the rule of law on a very, very good way, and we can only support also the decision that we took in the last weeks in the European Union. Bosnia-Herzegovina, I was there very often. I saw Valentin also. I think that the reflex to live in one country must be improved. That's the precondition to come also to conclusions with the European Union, and I think that it must be possible, it should be possible, but here all of us, we have to encourage the different communities in Bosnia-Herzegovina to be sure that they live in one country. So there are a lot of expectations. We are in 2014. I think that the trio of the coming presidencies, Italy, Latvia and Luxembourg, we will try to push in a good direction. So 2020 must be a reference year that we can really put the trains on the rail. On Turkey, I just want to mention also that this process is very interesting and very difficult, that's clear. I was there in the first council in 2004 when we decided green light. October 2005 started the negotiations. I think that the most important link between the European Union and Turkey is the respect of the values of democratic rule of law. Democratic values, it is a fight inside the European Union, that's clear, but it is also a precondition to become member of the European Union, and I think that we have to remain our objective. Turkey inside of the European Union with Turkey will be a strategic added value. And let me finish what Tibor said and some other colleagues here, enlargement. I think on the Balkans it's our matter, it's the matter of the European Union. With Turkey also, we have to fight and we have to try to find a way. About the countries, and I am very, very, it's difficult to define it, but if I say the countries situated between the European Union and Russia, everybody is right who says that Russia cannot have a veto right. But I agree with Tibor that we have to build, we have to make confidence building in the next years. Because I think that the peace project, the quality of the peace project must not be destroyed. I think that if in the next decade we rebuild confidence with Russia, again, Russia has not the right to veto our projects, and the destiny of all these countries of the Eastern Partnership cannot lay in the hands of Russia, but as peace project, and in order to make survive the peace project European Union, we have to try to come on another track. That depends on both sides, but I think we have at least to try to do it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jean, for your very differentiated overview on the enlargement process as a whole. And you were encouraging, like always. And now we come to something like concluding remarks presented by Carl Wild from Sweden. I hope that you can manage
from the Northern
that.
Balkans, yeah. No, I'm not quite certain they will be concluding, but some remarks anyhow. Agree with Sean on everything he said. I think it was good he brought Turkey into the perspective. Confidence building with Russia, yeah, it would help if they stopped invading countries, which is not something that we particularly like. We haven't seen anything like that since Saddam Hussein grabbed Kuwait more than 20 years ago, and that has of course led to a deterioration of confidence that must be repaired, primarily by those that did it. But on the perspectives here, I've been looking back over the past 5 years, because we are now in one of these periods of everything shifting inside the European Union. We have been able to sustain the process. And I think we should give credit to Stefan, who's here. I mean, he's still going to be the commissioner towards the end of the year, but his term is coming to an end. A lot of these things would not have been possible without him, and that should be said. But let it also be said that he needs a successor. And there is a need for a strong, a credible, and an empowered commissioner who can drive these issues forward during the next few years. It requires that engine that is the Commission to drive these rather cumbersome processes forward during the years to come. And I'm worried, and I'm worried for two reasons. One of them is what I see happening here, or to be precise, what I don't see happening here. I think reforms have been stalling in quite a number of the countries. I mean, one of the Copenhagen criteria is that of a functioning market economy. And the Commission has not yet been able to qualify any of these countries as a functioning market economy. Turkey has been certified as a functioning market economy, but none of the countries of the Western Balkans. And you need to look very, very carefully what do you need to do to meet that fundamental criteria. And if I look at some of the economic figures, they are worrying. I mean, take one thing that's the participation rate labor force. The countries where we are speaking about here is 46%. The average in the EU is 64%. And we agree in the EU that one of the problems that we have is that 64% is too low. And then here we are talking about a region that is 46%. We see extremely high levels of unemployment. We see very low levels of job creation all through. That needs to be the focus of the policies of every single government here, because otherwise, remember Tuzla, what happened there? When the despair gives rise to a protest of a sort, there could be many Tuzlas around this region in the years to come if we don't have a refocusing, I would say, on structural reforms. That's the one thing that worries me. The other thing, which has been alluded to both in the previous panel, this one, is of course the slight attitude shift that we see inside the European Union. Some of this has to do with the economic crisis and other things, no question about that. But at the same time, leadership requires a strategic perspective beyond the worries of the day. I mean, the Juncker statement when he's saying that there will be no new members during the next 5 years, yeah, that's probably true, but if that is the only sentence that you have on enlargement, it sends the wrong message. And that message must be corrected, because otherwise it's a message that sort of dampens the pressure for reform in these countries and increases the risk that we will have developments that we are not in favor of. And another thing that perhaps I'm happy had not been noticed that much is that in the very important document that our heads of state and government agreed on at the 26th, 27th of June, the strategic agenda for the next 5 years, the word enlargement does not figure. We try to get it in from our side, but it is not there. All of the major countries were not interested in having the enlargement as part of the strategic agenda of the next 5 years. That's wrong, and that must be corrected also. In the European Parliament, there is now discussion, and they want to formulate the agenda of the next 5 years as well. It will be interesting to see how they formulate it, and we should be attentive to that. So it is the absence of sufficient focus on structural reforms in these countries and in the absence of a strategic perspective on enlargement issues in the EU itself that combined is rather worrying. And it is worrying at a time when most other things are worrying, as a matter of fact. I mean, if you look at the next 5 years, we face very major political challenges. We have a revisionist Russia in the east. We have a complete meltdown in the south, with all of the implications for that. And we have a fracturing global order that we see the effects of in quite a number of different areas. And our neighborhood policy from the side of the European Union, and enlargement is the sharpest end or the sharpest instrument in the neighborhood policy, particularly in this part of the world and towards the east. The south is, of course, somewhat different in that particular respect. That is the key to the peace project of the European Union, which is the #1 objective of the entire process of European integration. Add to that I would say that the credibility of the European Union in its own part of the world, in our part of the world, is the key to the global credibility of the Union. So I think we have a double task. We tend to be preaching to the converted in a hall like this, but if we preach somewhat wider, we have a double task. You in the region, accelerate structural reforms, otherwise there will be Tuzlas everywhere. And we have the task, focus the strategic priorities of the European Union and understand that without enlargement, there are security risks, and there are significant risks to the global credibility of the European Union in the next 5 years. I'm not quite certain that was a conclusion for all of us, but it was at least a message from me.
It was really a conclusion, and we are very grateful for this, and I'm personally grateful that I have put that in a broader context, in the context of international challenges we are confronted with, and that you have again shown that the future of the EU enlargement is the most important part of European peace policy. Thank you very much for that. It would be very interesting now to start the next round of discussions with the panelists. Unfortunately, we have no time for that. I think we have collected a lot of very important ideas and creative remarks, and there's a lot of stuff for the morning wrap-up session we look forward to have. And now it's a great pleasure and honor for me to announce another very distinguished speaker to our meeting. That is the address made by Mr. Takao Makino, Parliamentary Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs of Japan. And I invite you to address the audience. And I ask our panelists to stay seated. Thank you.
Thank you. I speak in Japanese, so please use your headphone.エルラー議長、ご列席の皆様、本日はクロアチアフォーラムにお招きいただき、大変ありがとうございます。このフォーラムは、南東欧地域における協力の促進に重要な役割を果たしてきたフォーラムと伺っております。このような重要な会議を主催されましたクロアチア共和国政府のリーダーシップに、まずは敬意を表したいと思います。今般の会合では、南東欧地域の EU 統合プロセスが主要なテーマとなっていると承知しております。日本としては、南東欧諸国の EU 統合に向けた熱意と努力は、地域全体、そして国際社会の安定と繁栄につながるものと考えており、これを強く支持いたします。また、一足早くEU 加盟を果たしたクロアチア政府が、地域諸国の関わる取り組みを後押ししている点についても高く評価をいたします。本題に入ります前に、この場を借りて、本年5月半ばにクロアチア、セルビア、ボスニア、ヘルツェゴビナで発生した洪水被害で被災された方々に心からお見舞いを申し上げます。日本政府からは、洪水災害の発生後間もなく、これらの国々にテントやスリーピングパッドなどの緊急援助物資をお送りいたしました。また、日本の企業や国民も被災者への支援を行いました。これらの援助が被災された方々の少しでもお役に立つことを願っていません。日本は2011年、東日本大震災に際して、南東欧諸国の政府と国民の皆様方から温かい連帯と多くのご支援をいただきました。日本国民の間では、東日本大震災の際に助けていただいた恩返しに、南東欧の被災諸国を支援しようという機運が高まっております。このように遠く離れた日本と南東欧はお互いを思いやる気持ちでつながっていると思っております。南東欧地域は歴史的に東洋と西洋をつなぐ役割を果たしてまいりました。13世紀にベネチアにおいて東方見聞録を著したマルコ・ポーロは、このドブロブニクに近いクロアチアのコルチュラ島の出身であると伺っております。日本と南東欧地域は19世紀のほぼ同じ時期に近代化の道を歩み始めました。これはまさに両地域の間で 交流が始まった時期でもあります。セルビアとの間では、1882年に当時のセルビア王が即位を知らせる書簡を明治天皇に送り、明治天皇がセルビア王に返書を送られたことによって交流が始まりました。また、オーストラリア・ハンガリー帝国との間では、1869年に友好通商修好に関する条約が締結されて国交が樹立されました。日本がオーストラリア・ハンガリーで最初に任命した名誉領事のヒュッテロットは、1884年に来日した際に、アドリア海沿岸地方の除虫菊を持参をされました。日本では、その除虫菊が原料となって、蚊取り線香が発明され、今日、蚊取り線香は全世界に広まっております。距離的には遠く離れておりますが、このように日本と南東欧地域には長年にわたるユニークな協力の歴史があります。今日、グローバル化の発展によって、物理的な距離は大きな意味を持たなくなっております。そうした中で、日本は互いに自由、民主主義、人権、法の支配といった価値を共有し、その基礎の上で共に繁栄を模索するための重要なパートナーが南東欧地域で東欧諸国であると強く認識しております。南東欧地域は100年前も60年前も、そして20年前においても激動の歴史をたどってきました。しかし今や、すべての国が平和と繁栄のため、欧州の統合に向けて協力をしております。南東欧諸国は、近隣国との紛争を国際司法裁判所や、その他の国際的な紛争解決メカニズムを通じて、国際法にのっとって平和的に解決しようとしております。これは私たちすべてに対して素晴らしい見本を示すものであります。ここで日本と南東欧諸国の将来を展望する方策の柱として3つの柱を提案をしたいと思います。第一の柱は、日本と南東欧諸国がお互いをよりよく知るための方策です。この方策の一つは、人々の交流の活発化ではないかと思います。近年、日本からこのクロアチアを訪れる観光客が年間数万人にも上っております。これらの観光客がクロアチアのみならず、隣接する各国にも足を運び、南東欧諸国に関する知見を深めていることは大変喜ばしいことであります。日本も2020年の東京オリンピック・パラリンピックに向けて、国外からの観光客の受け入れの体制をますます充実させております。現在の安倍政権が2012年12月に発足して以来、アベノミクスの効果によって、通貨の円がユーロに対して2割近く安くなっております。その分、日本を観光する費用も安くなっております。日本は南東欧諸国の皆様が日本を訪れ、知見を深めていただくことを心から歓迎いたします。このほかに文化交流、スポーツ交流、学術交流、そして要人を含む政府間の対話などが挙げられます。スポーツの交流については、テニス、ハンドボール、レスリング、スキーなど、多くの分野で交流が行われております。サッカー日本代表チームの監督を務めたブスニア・ヘルツェゴビナ出身のビッツァ・オシム氏や、セルビア代表として活躍した ストイコビッチ氏の日本での活躍もよく知られております。スポーツをきっかけとして南東欧地域に関心を持つ若者が増えております。また政府の対応ではこの数ヶ月をとってみても4月にコソボからサチ首相が、そして6月にはマケドニアからグルエフスキー首相がそれぞれ訪日されるなど、最近ますます往来が活発化しております。将来を展望する第2の柱は、南東欧地域の平和を定着するための方策です。日本は南東欧地域に対して紛争終結以来、総額約22億米ドルの二国間 ODA を実施してまいりました。また、ボスニア・ヘルツェゴビナにおける和平履行委員会運営委員会のメンバーとして、紛争後の同国における和平履行プロセスに関与してきております。我が国は二国間の ODA を実施するにあたって、戦後復興や民生の向上はもちろんのこと、人間の安全保障と民族融和を重視しております。例えば、ボスニア・ヘルツェゴビナにおいては、人々を対人地雷の被害から守るための地雷除去支援を行うことにあたって、ボスニア・ヘルツェゴビナ連邦とスルプスカ共和国にまたがるエリアで、両エンティティの異なる民族同士の協力を促すような支援を実施しております。また、2008年には戦争を直接知らない南東諸国の若い世代を対象とした民族融和のための青年ワークショップを支援いたしました。このワークショップでは、南東欧諸国の首脳の強いご賛同を得ることができ、ワークショップの閉会式には、クロアチア、ボスニア・ヘルツェゴビナ、モンテネグロの当時の首脳にご出席いただきました。日本としては、今後ともこのような取り組みを続けていく考えです。そして、将来を展望する第3の柱は、南東欧地域の繁栄を促進するための方策です。この方策の一つは、日本と南東欧地域の経済関係の強化だと考えております。南東欧地域には、すでに一定の日本企業が進出しており、その多くは成功例となっております。ただし、南東欧地域と日本との間の経済関係は、まだまだ強化する余地があります。南東欧地域が欧州統合のプロセスを通じ、EU のルールを受け入れ、投資環境を整備することは、日本企業にとって南東欧地域が魅力的な進出候補先となる上で重要な点です。現に2013年7月に EU に加盟したクロアチアとの間では、クロアチアのエネルギープロジェクトに日本企業が参加する意向です。このプロジェクトが日本企業の参加を得て前進し、クロアチアと南東欧地域のエネルギー安全保障に貢献するとともに、日本とクロアチア、そして日本と南東欧地域の経済関係を大きく発展させる第一歩となることを強く期待いたします。最後に、日本は将来にわたって南東欧諸国と日本がグローバルなパートナーとして、地域の問題のみならず、環境や経済、人権といったグローバルな問題を解決するために協力するパートナーであり続けると確信をしております。南東欧地域のさらなる平和と繁栄、そして南東欧諸国と日本の友好関係がますます深まることを願って、このスピーチを終わらせていただきます。ご清聴ありがとうございました。Thank you very much.
Mr. Makino, thank you very much indeed for your excellent presentation. We are very grateful that you have made this long trip from Japan to Dubrovnik. We are very grateful for the Japanese support in the case of the flood and in general for the countries of this region. And we have carefully listened to your very concrete proposals you have made for strengthening the partnership between Japan and the countries of Southeast Europe. Thank you very much indeed again. And now we are at the end of the second panel. I am extremely grateful for all of these 9 panelists at the second session. Now you are invited to the lunch break, but exactly at 3 p.m. we will start again in this room with the third panel session. Thank you very much and good luck. No, it was a pleasure.